Thomas from German PHP Magazine. I'm here with Douglas Crockford at JavaScript Days 2012 in Cologne. Mr. Crockford, please introduce yourself.
I'm Douglas Crockford.
From Yahoo?
From Yahoo, yeah, that's right.
You're a well-known JavaScript superhero, I think. You just held your keynote here at JavaScript Days. Can you summarize it?
JavaScript is becoming an important language, but it's a misunderstood language. So in order to use it well, it's necessary to have specific information, and I'm trying to help provide that to people.
Okay, why is it misunderstood?
Oh, a lot of it's because of its strange history. I mean, even the fact that it's called JavaScript, it has nothing to do with Java. And it's almost like it was intentional that that name was created to confuse people.
You told something about the good parts and the bad parts, and which one is the worst part?
The worst part is JavaScript's reliance on global variables. The security problems that we see in the browser are rooted in that mistake.
Afterwards, your keynote, there was a question about Coffeescript. Can you repeat?
So Coffeescript is a new language which compiles into JavaScript. It uses JavaScript as the execution language. Coffeescript is beautiful and elegant and minimal. It's a lovely little language. I wish JavaScript looked a lot more like Coffeescript. I don't recommend using Coffeescript in production because it's still experimental and you don't want to be doing experiments in production. But for your own experiments or for hobby projects, it's a good choice.
So advantages of Coffeescript is in the syntax?
That's the only advantage. The semantics of Coffeescript are exactly the same as JavaScript. There's nothing you can do in Coffeescript that you can't do in JavaScript. It's just that for many things, the notation is more convenient.
What about Jquery? So it's used by a lot of developers because it's easy to understand. What's your opinion about Jquery?
Jquery is great. Jquery is a library that runs on top of the document object model, which is the API that the browser provides to JavaScript. The document object model is terrible. It's one of the worst APIs ever imagined. And JavaScript is such a powerful language that a relatively small library can turn the DOM into something that's useful. And Jquery does that. YUI from Yahoo I think does an even better job of doing the same thing. My advice to anybody is use one of these libraries. Don't ever try to talk to the document object model yourself because it's just pain and misery. But using a good library, it becomes something that's pleasant and productive.
You try to bring JavaScript to the server side. Is this the right approach?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of benefits that come from it. One is that JavaScript is actually a good language once you understand it. And so having JavaScript available on the server means you only have to be fluent in one language, or at least current at any moment to one language. That's a nice simplification. But there's also the benefit that you can design your code so that it can run on either end of the network. And that can give you a lot of flexibility in dealing with new platforms and old platforms.
There are some different engines, V8, Monkey. What's your favorite?
It doesn't matter. I mean, JavaScript is a surprisingly portable language. There's not much difference between any of the JavaScript engines, so they're all good. Microsoft, surprisingly, is very good as well. So any of them work, and they all work about the same, and they're all great. So that's one of the nice things about JavaScript.
You mentioned Microsoft. There are some efforts from Microsoft regarding Windows 8. Bringing web developers to the desktop. Is this a good approach?
Probably.
Okay. Okay, but there are some restrictions, like actually you can't use the built-in camera on the iPad, for example. Are these the right restrictions, or?
Yeah, so part of the problem we have is that we've never had a proper security model in any of the platforms that we use. And as the platforms get more intimate with people, that becomes a bigger and bigger problem. So it's not just being able to clear out your file directory now. I mean, it can now spy on you. It can record your conversations. It can show your picture and transmit it to anybody on the web without you knowing about it. That's something to worry about. JavaScript, as practiced in the browser, comes closer to providing a secure environment for applications than any other application delivery system. It's still not right, but it's better than everything else. And that seems to be a better place to start than any of the other things. Something you see in other platforms is a blame the victim security model, where they'll ask the user a question that the user cannot possibly understand or answer correctly. And then once things go wrong, it's the user's fault for having agreed to it. That's not a security model. That's just stupid. The browser doesn't do that. Now the price of that is that the browser is limited in some ways, and we need to get smarter about how we reduce those limitations. But it seems to be the right way to start.
There are some new competitors like Google Start. Why?
I don't know. You'll have to ask someone from Google. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of problems with JavaScript, and JavaScript should not be the last programming language. So I would like to encourage lots of experimentation in new languages. Programming language is the most important tool available to programmers. We still haven't gotten it right. You know, clearly, JavaScript didn't get it right. So we need to keep doing those experiments. We need to keep practicing. You know, it takes us about 20 years to make an advance in programming languages. We need to get going faster than that. So I'm very happy to see the experiment. The thing that's problematic with Google is they seem to be already claiming victory and they haven't finished the design yet. So Dart doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what Google's trying to do there. As an experiment, I would applaud Google as a plot to replace JavaScript. Maybe it does, but it seems unlikely.
A few years ago, JavaScript was considered as bad.
Still considered that.
Okay, but from consumer side. So
well, not by consumers. Consumers have no knowledge of the programming systems in the devices. You know, your mom doesn't know what JavaScript is or care.
Well, that's right, yeah. But the papers wrote that JavaScript is bad, you have to deactivate it, to disable it. What happened the last few years that JavaScript now is the big thing? It
was Ajax. So in 2000 or 2001, Gartner predicted that the web was about to die the same way that Waze and Gopher had died. It was going to be replaced by the X-Internet. And a lot of people believed them, including Microsoft. So Microsoft disbanded the IE team and started working on the next Internet, whatever that was going to be. So they were very surprised in 2005 when Jesse James Garrett published the paper about Ajax. And suddenly, Microsoft was blindsided by the web the second time. And it has taken off since then. And partly it's because of the security things that the browser got right, in that there's no scary dialogue that faces the user when they get a web application. Nothing saying, do you trust these guys who you don't even know who they are, or will you give them these capabilities that you don't know what they are? You know, the web doesn't do that, it just works. And so that made it much easier to deliver applications than any other platform could do. And I think that's what caused it to take off. The other thing was that everything else failed. I mean, there were lots of attempts to try to capture the web or to replace the web. You see, Adobe has made several attempts at that, as has Microsoft. Google's trying to do it now. And so far, all of those have failed. You know, Java was supposed to rule the web. Java was a colossal failure. Java then tried to take over in consumer electronics and other places. Hasn't worked very well either. In the phone platform, They have tried literally everything. They have tried proprietary things, they've tried to do open things, they've done the Java, and it all failed. And so now they're doing the last thing that worked, which is the web, JavaScript. So they're trying that on the phone, and that looks like it's going to work. That's not what anybody wanted or predicted, but that's sort of the way it's turning out. That JavaScript is succeeding because it works. And getting stuff that just works turns out to be surprisingly hard and uncommon.
So the future of mobile is the web? Seems
so. And it's not settled out yet. There's competition. So you see the app stores are trying to capture the web, so that there's this point of monopoly that all applications have to go through, which is sort of counter to the web philosophy, which is everybody has an equal standing. Will that form win? Or ultimately, I think the open form wins, just because people benefit from the freedom of having an application delivery system that can deliver applications from everybody. But there are forces who are trying to close it, including the DRM forces. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm hoping that it stays open.
So Mozilla's boot to Gecko is the right attempt towards the mobile world, I don't know, the mobile universe. So is this the next big thing?
So the thing that seems to be winning in the mobile space is WebKit. I don't know why, but it seems to be the thing that has been most adopted. Mozilla has done some very good stuff. WebKit has done some very good stuff. I'm hoping that it stays a competitive environment. I think it is better that there not be one winner. So I hope that Mozilla can stay strong.
So there's a chance that WebKit is the next EE6 or EE5? Because everyone right now is developing for WebKit.
So one of the dilemmas of the web is because it doesn't come from a single company. It doesn't come from Adobe, it doesn't come from Microsoft, it doesn't come from Sun or Oracle. Developers have to work with all of the different variations of the platform. And the number of those seems to be growing rather than shrinking. And that is a hardship on developers. And to the extent that the W3C standards are inadequate, and they're seriously inadequate, that makes life more difficult for the developers. But I don't want to go the other way and say, okay, there's just going to be one platform from now on. Because having the diversity of platforms, I think, has been a healthy thing. And that would be it would be bad to lose that.
Just one more question. You mentioned the good things of JavaScript and JSLint. How can JSLint help me to be a better developer?
JSLint is smarter than I am about JavaScript. And it's probably smarter than you too. As painful as it is, follow its advice. It's trying to help you.
Okay. Mr. Crockford, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope I see you again. And have a nice stay here.
Thanks.